Hear me and Rebecca?
Hello.
Okay, so there's a chat box to the bottom. I'm going to pop something in there now. Okay, can you all see that? Introduce yourselves, say hello, say who you are, which rag you're from, which uni you're from. I don't know if they can see it. We've got 30 or 27 attendees. Hello, Alice, Anne, Anna, Claire, Daniel, Lena. Oh, there's lots of people. No. Okay, so I'm Becky. I'm chair of NASFA, and this is Rebecca. So Rebecca is the National Events Manager of Sense. She's also on our committee. Is that can't hear? Oh, okay. Don't worry. Oh, apologies. That is me. All panels and attendees. Can you see that? Yeah, should be able to see that now. Okay, great. Yeah, all introducing yourselves. So that chat there can be used for questions, so everyone can see the questions that you're asking. I'll be moderating them as we go through, as Rebecca's doing her slides and maybe feeding some questions in. You can also kind of, if you want to feed into any of the conversations, we've got the coffee shop afterwards as well, where Rebecca will also be attending. So without further ado, I will pass over to her.
Cool. So yeah, so I presenting usually much prefer having a crowd. So if you have any questions throughout, just pop them up in the questions, and we don't need to wait for the end. We can work throughout. So as Becky said, this session is just going to be around succeeding as a smaller rag. I currently work at Sense as National Events Manager, but I'm also the Democratic Engagement Lead for NASFA. And when I was a student, I was from Reading, so I don't know if anyone from Reading is here, but I was vice president for Reading and then went on to be president, and during that time we won the Small Rag of the Year award in 2016, and then I went on personally to win the Student Fundraiser of the Year in 2017, and then after graduating I went to work at a small charity where I was the second full-time employee. So to give you a kind of, I guess, a bit of why I'm still hanging on, but also why I'm really passionate about growing things and putting a bit of work into things. So I'm sure you guys have heard this loads now, so you can ask the questions in the chat. The presentation falls into kind of 4 sections, so I'll probably pause at the end of each one to ask the questions, but just pop anything in and Becky just interrupt me, and then we'll be in the coffee shop after as well. So this is kind of where we're going to start with this presentation. So I have done this presentation before, and I had this horrible fake it till you make it graphic, and I thought this was much more philosophical now. But when we are a small rag, we need to kind of convince people that we are bigger than we are. And there are some really simple ways that we can ever do this, really. So we can channel the perception of being big whilst being small. And if we're not the people who are having the most fun in the room, we're never going to make our rags bigger, we're never going to get more people involved and more people passionate. And so what I would say to you guys is, don't necessarily get in your head about what things you can't do, how things are perceived. If no one turns up at your event, which I promise you will happen at some point this year, and if you want to put something in the NASFA group or message someone about it, it'll have happened to someone else as well, but nobody will turn up, and you'll put all this hard work in and you'll feel like it's wasted. But instead of getting in your head and feeling disheartened, you need to make it look like you had the best time that you kind of ever could have had, and you need to make sure that you're posting about it on Facebook, you're super enthusiastic, and you're giving off that kind of, I guess, like shark energy, so that people think, gosh, this is something that I want to be part of. And whether or not your events have sold 2 tickets or 5 tickets, you always want them to seem sold out. You want to create that demand, and you want to get people committed and wanting to come back, and just seeing something on Facebook is enough sometimes to get them engaged. So the first thing we need to remember is that although we may feel small, that's not how we want to be perceived. I think we also need to think about why being small is so important, and I think this is something, again, that I wasn't good at when I was on committee, and so really want you guys to think about. So when you're kind of sitting there and you're like in your head and you're like, gosh, where do I start? I think you need to think of the privilege you have. You get to decide what defines your RAG. I wrote my RAG constitution. I assume it's still kicking around somewhere, although people have probably ignored it now because it's probably irrelevant. But it's, you know, something that you can do, and you're putting those things in place. You can make those decisions that you think are best, and your opportunity to have an impact is huge. And you get to put the building blocks in place for future success. Now, I remember setting up BT My Donate. We were able to kind of get our charity number sorted out, and that made such a big difference. It kind of revolutionized the way that we were working, and we put that building block in place for the future. You get to decide the relationship you have with your student union or university, and those are two really important things. Now, those things sometimes are great. There's some really good advantages to having good relationships with your student union and university. There are some downsides, but you get to decide what that looks like. We used to get our student union to donate £250 for us to stand on the quad on open days, just so that parents could see the uni did something good. And it was just a really simple way of us building that relationship, which then led on to things being improved in the future. And most importantly, you personally get to have this experience. I wouldn't have got the jobs that I went on to get without this experience within RAG. And it's really important that you're selling that growth when you're going for job interviews and writing your CV, because that shows some real resilience and a really strong skill set. So I'm sure these things aren't necessarily specific to a small RAG, but the way you deal with them are a bit different. And I think when you're thinking about what your aims are and what your success looks like, I really would discourage you from just thinking about a number. You don't want to think, you know, like £20,000 is my target and that's all I want. You really want to be thinking about what else that you can make of that opportunity. So we can look at how many students are recognising your logo. That would be a really big success. What student groups are you interacting with? Have you improved your charity application process? All of those things are important success measures that you should put in place. And then integrating with your student experience, again, really vital. And how can you get the most out of that, the time that you have? So Rosie can pop a poll. So I did this presentation a couple of years ago, and it became quite controversial over what people defined as a small RAG. So I was really interested to get from you guys what you define as a small RAG. So obviously we will have RAGs, I'm sure, who are starting out brand new, and that's great. I hope that we're able to get some things popped into place for you now. We have some people who think it's around, you know, what you're able to put in place, so, you know, challenge events and things, and then obviously you have some people around the total as well. Oh, so fun. We've got quite a lot of brand new committees. So we've got 8 people who are just starting out new. And then we've got 7 people who consider a small RAG a 3 or 4 person committee. And then everyone else is between the others. But 8 people are now a 3 or 4 person committee. Cool. So that's really helpful. I know where we are now, and we can definitely do some good things to help with that. So the first thing I'm just going to mention, so I will mention these things kind of throughout, and I originally didn't have this slide in, but I thought it'd be helpful just to put this concisely all in one place. So I would recommend that when you set up your committee, you put just some really simple tools in place. I remember even when I was on committee, we really got in our heads about what access to software we had through the student union, and it was all a lot. And I would just say there are some things you can just really simply start with that are going to solve a lot of issues for you. So the first thing for managing your committee is I would put in place a shared Trello board so you can all see what everyone is doing, especially on a small committee. You need to be supporting each other. You want that visibility. A Slack, we use Slack at NASFA, again, really helpful, means that you can cross-work really easily. And I would put those two tools in place for managing the small committee, and I would get maybe your student officer involved on those things as well, so they can see where they can support you as well. And also so they can see all the hard work that you're putting in, so they know that they can match that and what they can shout out about. I would recommend putting like a Hootsuite and a MailChimp in place. You know, there's only a couple of people. We can't be scheduling Facebook posts on the day. We need to do those all in one lump, and we need to be really time efficient. got degrees to do. So Hootsuite and MailChimp, and they both give you statistics that maybe right now you don't need to get into the nitty-gritties of. It's quite a lot, but just having that there. We had really confusing issues with setting up ticket sales. Your student union website might have that capability. If not, just put an Eventbrite together. It doesn't need to be complicated. And also use Canva. I'm sure everyone knows about Canva, but really, really great way to have some really cool and free design tools. So all of those platforms have free things. I'm sure you've heard of them all, but think about how you're using them. And I'd say if you can get all of those things in place, you're fairly set up to have a really, really good year. Cool. So let's start with committee. So at the moment, we've had quite a few people who've come back and said that they see the small rag as having a small committee. So this is my committee. I hope that picture isn't too blurry. So this isn't all the committee. This is our committee and the staff from the charities that we were working with that year. So our committee is about a third of that picture. But I would definitely... Right, so I forgot how to turn the page over. So we're going to look at how we start committee. Now, your student union might require you to have a few core roles. Our student union required us to have a president, a secretary, and a treasurer. For us, they were really hard roles to recruit for, and it made it really, really difficult to kind of get people to work on different projects. So we embedded those roles within other roles and responsibilities. So for example, our secretary also was a person who was doing a lot of our marketing stuff, but that was a way we could work with the student union when we couldn't really create a big committee. Apart from having a president and a kind of maybe a bit of a leadership team, I would really, I guess, invoke you to consider having quite general roles. This is something that we did a lot in my first job and working in that small charity. We had a leader, but then we had a lot of people who could work on a lot of things. And if you've got a small committee of only 3 or 4 people, kind of putting people into those like tracks of you're the events person, you're the social media person, you're this person, can be quite restrictive. And it can also mean that people aren't as helpful at cross-working, people don't know what's happening everywhere. And when you get a bigger committee, you might need to put those roles more in place. But I'd really implore you to look at a general committee structure and having, I think we just called them like RAG officers and RAG coordinators who have special interests. And it means you have to know your committee a bit better, but it means that they're able to move around and you're able to get things moving a little bit quicker. I would also look at tactical committee recruitments. Now, we did some tactical committee recruitments with a hockey president, which was an interesting partnership, but also people who were involved in Roosno or who were academic representatives already within the university. We had people who worked for like the bars on campus, as they were people who already had friends and they already had peers on their Facebook and their social media, and they were people who had big friendship circles, and that immediately provided us with an audience to start putting information out to, and we could use those people as, I guess, almost like brand representatives of what we were doing, and it gave us, you know, a bigger audience than we had on our core social media channels. So I would definitely suggest trying to be tactical with that recruitment. I would say, again, depends on the rules of your student union, but if you can have a good chat with them, and if we've got, I think we have some SU staff on here, giving RAGs the freedom to have interviews over elections, I think is really important, especially in the really early stages of setting up a RAG. You know, you can rarely get enough people to stand as vote for roles in an election, but by having interviews, it actually allows you to imagine a team that works together. And if you've only got 3 or 4 people who are working really closely, you need people who are going to get on and people who are really going to contribute. So I think definitely looking at what that can offer at the moment. And yeah, making sure that everything is really centralised so that the whole committee can see can also help them to pick out friends. And we would basically kind of stick people onto the committee as those roles needed to be fulfilled and as we needed more capacity. So I would definitely say keep yourself quite open. Don't feel like you need to kind of have your committee and shut the doors. I'd say as you need people, bring them in and find those people with those particular specialities. So on to the next slide. So this is part of our committee handover that you're looking at now. But just in terms of managing your committee, you might have people who are all over the campus, people who are engaged, people who are not engaged. And when you initially don't have any infrastructure, it can be quite frustrating to know how to communicate with those people. I would just keep it really simple. If you've got a committee of 3 or 4, make sure you're checking in with those people individually, but also making sure you're having meetings. We had a weekly meeting on a Monday. And that worked so well. Everyone brought what they were working on, and we were able to work together and to communicate. And it seems really simple, but when you're starting a new RAG especially and that infrastructure isn't in place, you don't know what the tried and tested things are. And we found that our I guess like income and our acceleration really came when we committed to having those weekly meetings. And the final thing I'll just mention on this is to make sure you're storing everything centrally. Google Drives as well as a Trello, you can link through to them. Again, really, really helpful. Just simple things. I'm sure a lot of you intuitively think of these things, but actually using them within your committee structure, I think, is super important as well. So we are now looking at our handover document. We did this so that everyone could add to it. It was like a live PDF, and it meant that everyone was able to throw things into the mix year on year, but making sure you're having that really consistent handover. I think Callum is running a session on handovers, which I don't know if it's happened or is coming, but either way you'll be able to see it, and I would definitely attend that, because we found that RAGs can have a real yo-yo effect. So when I started working on RAG, the first year before I got involved, they'd raised £11,000, but the year before that they'd raised like £30,000, and it was going up and down. But I think having a really good handover, making sure you've got committee who will go year on year, is really important. So making sure you're getting those second year committee members in early. But small committees are great. You'll make the best friendships, but be tactical. Make sure you've got all the people that you need to get the word out, but also to keep that RAG consistent. Cool. So that's the end of the committee part. I don't know if anyone has any specific questions on committee stuff. If you do, you can just pop them down below. Obviously, with a small RAG, everything is so changeable, and you're going to have people leave, people join. It's going to all be a bit weird. You're probably going to have someone who you don't hear from for 6 weeks, and they pop up randomly. But yeah, just I think keeping things small, flexible, and making sure you're filling committee throughout the year, I think, is really important. Oh, Becky's linked the session in the chat if you want to watch that one later, Callum's session. So if we've got no questions, we'll move on. So I was watching Josh's session yesterday on marketing, and he said that basically just remember nobody cares. I think he actually said nobody gives a shit, but we'll go for nobody cares. And I think that's really important to remember, especially when you have a small RAG. You can feel like you're banging this giant drum, and then sometimes, even my housemates didn't know what was going on, and it was so frustrating because I was running around, and you'd be like, come on guys, someone must at least be seeing me do this. So you need to be different. You need to find ways of getting in touch with people differently, or you need to learn how to utilize those pre-existing platforms. And I would say, as a small RAG, you do not have the resource to start creating new things. You don't have money, probably. We had no money. I think we got like £20 a year from the student union, and so we had like no money, and you don't have the people to be making things that are new. So you'll see that when I come onto this presentation, a lot of the stuff I'm mentioning is using other people and like using them to basically, again, going back to the fish at the start, really faking it and making people feel like you're bigger than they are. So, we'll just go back to some 30. So keep as much stuff centralized, keep your obviously your normal channels and things up to date. Make sure you've got a page on the student union website that's up to date. Really simple stuff, but really important, because people won't have really heard of RAG. So you're really setting the precedent of what your expectations are. But always make sure you have a really clear offer for them of what you want them to engage in. We made the mistake of being like, oh, I'll get involved in RAG, but not having a specific thing that they could tangibly do. And I think that affects volunteering a lot, which we'll get into a bit later. So if this is your student union, I think it's actually the Royal Albert Hall, but if this is your student group, there's a lot of people there, and you know, even uni or the student unions will not be in touch with that number of people ever. But if we're thinking about how many people we want to have a successful year, how many people RAG needs to have a better year than last year, I think realistically, when I kind of thought about it, we're probably thinking about these 10 people down here. If you think roughly how many people that RAG interacted with in the previous year, you don't want to then suddenly jump to, you know, everybody in the student body. You want to keep it small, and you want to work out who that group is. So are they people who are already enthusiastic to work, who are within the student union? Are they people who already are volunteering? Are they people who you know work with the charities that you are working with? But you need to really think about that group. And I think, again, this is probably quite common sense when you're applying it to a student society. I think people let these things kind of slip and they get too enthusiastic and they really go for it. So spending a bit of time at the start of the year and working out who those like 50 or so people are that you want to engage with RAG in that particular year will probably change the way that you work. And it might be worth getting a few of the committee together to find out who they think those people are as well. But it will really help you to start building. And you know, year on year, it'll then get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you might end up with a considerably larger group, I hope eventually to the whole student body, but you can't do that if you're just kind of throwing shots in the dark. You need to be a bit more strategic to begin with. So I have noticed, and this happened within my own RAG as well, is when you have a smaller RAG and there's less kind of rules around rebranding and bringing on new things, I found that a lot of people were like insistent on rebranding every year. Now I'll go on to show you some of the RAG branding, and I apologise if there is somebody from Reading on here who hasn't noticed some of the things I'm going to mention, because I think it'll bother you as it bothered me. But there were some things that didn't work with the branding. But the rebranding to me really wasn't the answer, and I don't think it makes success. I think if you're a brand new RAG, you also don't need a complicated brand. You just need really a logo and some really simple, maybe one-liners that you can use consistently, that the people will recognise, but you don't need anything complicated. So going on to this particular slide, we've got RAGs that love rebranding. Everyone thinks they could do a bit better than the previous year, but especially as a small RAG, if you know, even 5 students recognise your logo and your target for that year is 50, you're taking a massive step back by rebranding. And I'd use this example of Tropicana. So this was in North America, and Tropicana in 2009 spent £35 million trying to redesign. They thought, you know, they were going to have this fancy new packaging and it was going to bring it into the 21st century. It took them months to work on, and they rolled it out. And during that time, the Tropicana sales dropped by 20%. And that sales loss was seen as an increase in other orange juice brands, but they went on to lose within only 6 weeks $30 million, which they then retrospectively went back and went to their previous branding. So what I would just say to you guys is, you know, as I say, if your target audience is 50, you've got 5 people who already know that branding, I would just stick with it. And I'm going to show you how you can stick with it. So this was the logos that we had. So this is my issue with this logo. So it says raising and giving Reading. So it doesn't really make sense. No one really knows why it says that. It was made on Canva. So if you've not got a logo, you can make them on Canva. And the great thing about Canva is that you're able to edit the logos. So all of these different logos were made really simply on Canva. But what we basically did was we had our core logo that no one really liked. It didn't really work for anything. It's square, so it's really hard to put onto any like documents, and it has many colors in. So if you try and get it printed on anything, it makes your printing really expensive. But we were able to use the logo to kind of make our branding consistent across all the different things we did. So you'll see there's a Christmas Lenny, that's our logo, is the lion. Who again knows why? Not consistent with university branding. We've got a Halloween lion, the main logo, the Movember logo, and then we also have the Curly Fries logo. So curly fries got removed from our campus, and basically the student union brought them back and the profits went to RAG. It was kind of one of the things that really boosted our profile. Of all the hard work we put in, that was sadly the thing that kicked off a bit. But we really did find that having that consistent logo, if someone then knew us for curly fries, they were seeing the curly fries logo and they could really simply match that back. So I would say keeping that super simple. I would also say avoid, oh, that's too far. I would say avoid having branding that is like specific for your events. So we'll go on to the next page, but we had a specific branding for Are You Lost? So that was Lost. Are You is Reading University, and people loved it. People knew Are You Lost, and people would ask us about it. But people didn't make the connection to RAG because the prevalent branding was Are You Lost? And so people then wouldn't go on to do another event or to engage in something else. But I would definitely say try and be super consistent. This is how we did it. This wasn't until my second year where we raised a bit more money. So if you're kind of starting out, this won't be for you yet. But having event tops with the different event on the back, people wore them to run around campus, worked really well. And we also had the grey jumpers, which are our committee jumpers, which we loved, and then other people loved them and they would ask after them and how they got them. So we were able to order a few more. They obviously brought them, and then they were kind of walking billboards in lectures. So making your stash really, really attractive and wearable. The year after I was on committee, they changed it and people didn't wear it as much, and so obviously the amount that was being promoted decreased a little bit. But you need to get your logo out there. It's super important.
Sorry, Rebecca, can you just explain what Lost is and Jailbreak and things like that? Because some people that have just started RAGs don't know what they are.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, Lost is where you get dropped in the middle of nowhere. So we dropped our students usually about an hour and a half to 2 hours away from where the campus was, and they had to try and get back to campus without spending any money. So they had to kind of hitchhike or borrow a bike or something and get back. And Jailbreak is the opposite. So you start at campus, and students usually have about 48 hours to try and get as far away from campus as possible. And so we had students get to like Abu Dhabi and Morocco. Even when we are a relatively small RAG as well. But yeah, I don't know if that's helpful. There isn't a bit of an event section at the moment. In a moment, if anyone has any more specific events questions, that's kind of my interest. So we can do those all day long if people like. Cool. So the other thing, again, super simple, a mailing list. You need to obviously make sure that you're adherent to your student union's guidelines on storing data, but you can put this out through Facebook, and I obviously don't know if there's going to be like a student fair this year, but just so simple, but something even really established societies on campus I didn't see them doing. And as long as you put it in your terms and conditions and your data protection, you're going to hold that data for the 3 years. You have a pool of people who you can contact about those events and about those things you're doing over the 3 years. And it's just super simple. You can do it on Google Forms and upload it to MailChimp, and it's really, really simple stuff to do as well. So, oh yeah, I've just seen Sam's comment on the Jamie Oliver Turkey Twizzlers ban. I think that was similar to the curly fry situation, which was felt hard on our campus as well. Cool. So moving on to charities and challenge events. So this can be really tricky for a small RAG for many reasons. I think student unions are quite reluctant to let smaller student groups do something as significant as send students to like Zimbabwe or send them, cycling from London to Paris. And that's kind of understandable. We had to do quite a lot of work in showing how we were going to do that, but also how we were going to keep that consistent over several years. They didn't want to have something that was offered one year that was then gone the next year. And you'll understand from my following slides, I think a lot of that burden you can put and ask charities for support on, because they will have done this before and they will have worked through these things with student unions before. So by challenge events, I'm kind of in this section specifically looking at your international treks, your maybe like 3 peaks in the UK, and things like, London to Paris cycles, those things specifically. We'll go on to other events more in a moment. So I think when you're kind of at the first position of looking at challenge events, I would contact several charities, and we contacted lots of charities, and we had some really good chats with them about what they could do to support us. I think these questions are no different to other RAGs, but I think the specific difference is when you're small is that their answers need to be quite different, and also you probably need to get the support of at least someone in your student activities team or your student officer to be able to go ahead with them. And so that might mean that the charities have to work with you a bit more to provide that kind of case for setting these things up. So I think if we're looking at one minute, let's do this slide first. So when we're contacting these charities, we need to set expectation early, and you need to be really transparent with them that you are a smaller RAG, you're really keen on going, you really want to set challenges up, but here are our challenges. And these are the things that we might need your help to resolve. And some charities might not have the resource to help you. That's okay, every charity is different. But I think those who can see the potential, we had some really great partnerships with some charities that aren't around and some charities that are now, so I won't mention which ones specifically, but they were able to work with us and provide training for our committee, and were able to come into our student union and to talk to the relevant people to get these things put in place. So, but I think being transparent with them about what support you need early on will mean they can step in and help. I think it's really reasonable to ask them if they've worked with smaller RAGs before and how they've supported them. And you want this to be part of your culture of your RAG and how your RAG grows, because this is how you're going to increase your target and get, over that maybe like £40,000 mark. You will need to kind of start looking at challenges to get those things in. So I would say, definitely ask them, and they should be able to help you. And ask what happens if you don't meet their expectation. Now, I think this is really important. So if, for example, they need 20 students, which used to be the number, it might have changed now, for an event to be viable for them, what happens if you don't meet that number? Are you able to kind of go in with another smaller RAG and to do a joint trek or a joint expedition with their students? And do you need to facilitate that, or is that something that the charity can help you to facilitate? And they're the kinds of things that will help you to feel more confident, and I think help your student unions to feel more confident taking this initial financial commitment on. How can they support you? When you're doing challenge events, you need to have students on campus, you need to have people who are enthusiastic about it, you need to have people who are going to sign up. And so how are they going to help you? Are they going to provide you with printed posters to put up on campus? Because do we have access to printer? Probably not. So are they going to provide you with those things? Is somebody going to be able to provide a session? Are they going to expect you to do that? How are they going to help you to recruit your team leader? I would really recommend having a team leader who you kind of put almost a bit onto committee, so that you're able to support them as well. And definitely get in touch with smaller RAGs, really important, who I'm sure you guys will see some of your peers on here now, and look at how they've done it. How have bigger RAGs got the support of charities as well? And just test it. Set what you think before you go into this is an acceptable level of student engagement, and also manage that risk. So look at something like maybe a UK trek first before you go international. That isn't something that we did, and I think in hindsight would have been really beneficial to do something UK based. Oh, fab. Sam has just said, charities do go looking for RAGs to pair up with. We get regular emails for charities looking to team up. So yeah, if you can get like another RAG together to meet that minimum requirement, that can be a really good way of getting started when you don't have that student engagement yet. When you go out for your charity of the year, I think we'll just whittle through this quickly because we might run out of time, but again, not that different to bigger RAGs, but the answer will be different. So what is your impact going to be? What can charities do to support you? What materials can they offer, what established events and campaigns can you get involved with, and how do they engage with students? I think you want to look at things like, can they offer you a few collection buckets? We had a few dozen broken collection buckets. You know, is that something that they're able to facilitate? Are they able to help you I wrote a few things down here. Yeah, they're able to provide your committee with a bit of training. Those things that hopefully you'll be able to pay them back and you'll be able to raise more than them. Might be things that are cheeky, but they might be able to help you with. Fab. So now we're going to get on to our events section. So we've had a bit of a chat about Lost and Jailbreak. But what I would... Oh, fab. So we've got a bit of a discussion going on in the group chat for people who aren't looking about setting up a small rag, or setting up anyone else like to set up rag like a group chat. That would be fun. Yeah, I think that would be really helpful. So going into fundraising events, so what fundraising can we do with minimal resources? So for us, we were able to get some collection tins that we managed to wangle off a charity that was literally throwing them out. They happened to be the kind of right colour, although there was a mix of purple and green, but you make these things work. And we were allowed to put them out into the union shops, and we were able to put them into the student like supermarket, the Korean supermarket, Bagel Man, the bookshop, you know, the bar, all these things where people use a lot of cash. And we were able to get not a huge amount of money, but about £70 a week through loose change, that really over the year, if you think that was every week that students were on the campus, really simple. All we had to do was go and collect it, put our logo big on the front, people knew what was going on. Donut sales at Union, again, really helpful. If you've got the Krispy Kreme near you, you can do the discount thing, and where you get like 5 dozen donuts for the cost of the donuts, and then you can sell them. We just used to put a stall up at on a union night, and people used to buy them. Everyone was drunk, everyone loved donuts. We always sold out without fail. And then Freshers Move-In Raid, we did this with parents. We'd give them directions, they'd put £1 in the pot. Obviously that depends on COVID, but really simple. Now, how I would run your events is to look at pre-existing events on your campus. And I'd say you want about 1/3 of your events to be this, because you don't have the capacity to do a lot of events. So what can you already get involved in? What club nights are there? Your union might need a bit of persuading to let you do this, but can you have like a rag night where you just turn the lights green? Do you have a student union quiz that you can take over one week and the prize money can be donated towards rag? Do you have, does Drama Sock, do they have shows that you can run the tuck stall at? Can you get involved in varsity? The vast majority of these things, you just need to ask and people will find a way for you to get involved. You're chatting to students, they're getting to know you, but these are by far the things that take the least amount of time to set up, and they're the least amount of work. So you need to make sure you've got a bulky, I'd say at least 1/3 of your timetable needs to be things that already exist. Then I'd say you're looking at around 1/5 to 2/5 of things that are set up with sports and societies. We did a naked calendar, meant that all the sports students got involved, but that was quite a big bit of work. But you know, our football teams, can they have a, like, I don't know, a week where they donate a few pounds and everyone wears funny socks or something? Sounds ridiculous, they might laugh at you at first, but if you can convince the student union to help you and to kind of say, oh, you know, if you do this, it's like a good mark in your direction, it can go towards your society award or something, that can help. We had committee was on other committees, so I was on the Yoga Lattes committee. Who knows what it actually was, but basically we were able to, in Rag Week, do a in the dark Yoga Lattes. Everyone had little lights, everyone paid £1. We raised like £200 and about 100 people found out about Rag. And then signature Rag events. So we spoke about Lost and Jailbreak. Do you want to put a Rag Week in? Rag weeks are a lot of work. I wouldn't recommend it if you've only got like 2 or 3 committee members. But if you can do things in partnership with other people, I would look at that. And until you've got this established audience, and until things like Jailbreak and Lost are doing well and you've got challenges set up, I wouldn't look at setting up a signature event. I think you need to have a few years and a really strong audience before you set up something that can't be recognised. And when you're promoting these events like Jailbreak and Lost, there are plenty of articles that are written about them from other rags. Like there's one on the tab from when we had students get to Abu Dhabi. So just use those so people can see those. And who else can do the work for you? So when we had our RAG week, we were able to convince our student union to let us partner with the kind of club night in town. They wrote us a big check and they just stuck our logo on there and branding for that week. And there's another way there you can see how we use the logo. Student officers sharing Jailbreak tickets, and then members of staff and the student union sharing MAG applications. When you're promoting events, when you're promoting these points of engagement, especially events, you aren't going to find those people. You need to work with people who have different and bigger followings already. And always make money on your ticket sales, because I'm rattling, I'm going to run out of time, but always make money on your ticket sales, because you want to have a donation regardless of what your event raises. So always make sure that you have that in place. So volunteering, we're going to go a bit off the wall. What do you need volunteers for, and do you need them? And I would argue, especially if you're setting up a RAG, you don't need volunteers yet. You might need volunteers to help on a particular day, but you don't need a network of volunteers. It's problematic. It's hard, really hard to manage. And people, I think, see other RAGs with like these big volunteering events and these big, like, you know, members of the RAG Society events. And I would say, unless you've got someone whose whole time can be dedicated to putting in quite a lot of work to recruit volunteers and keeping them engaged and then finding ways to reward them, I don't think you need this yet. However, if you do decide that you need them, I would consider pitching it as a one-off volunteering experience rather than a regular role, helping them to run particular events, and hopefully your student union can help you promote that. Or your university. We had like a volunteering on campus email that our university sent out every 2 weeks. Find out if your uni has one of those. Remember, these are your key people for future committee, and that is the main downside of not having regular volunteers. But what we did is, if we had really enthusiastic volunteers, we would just put them onto committee. But this is a really strong way of looking at how you get people from freshers to committee. How do you incentivize these people to engage? Do you have socials? I think it's really difficult when there's just 2 or 3 people on the committee, but I'd honestly just take all my friends along. My poor housemates got dragged along to everything, and that would keep those things moving. And can volunteers provide meaningful additional capacity? And if you don't think they can, I think this is somewhere where, as a new RAG, especially a growing RAG, so somewhere around the like £20,000-30,000 mark, that's when I start thinking about volunteers. But and when you've got good events like Lost and Jailbreak set up, until then, I would think, is this more work than we're going to get out of it? You need to do a bit of a cost benefit analysis. So I just had a couple of additional tips for just doing a bit more with less, and then hopefully we'll have 5 minutes for questions. So yeah, I'd say if you need collection buckets, everyone needs collection buckets. There's a fundraising chat Facebook group, which is mostly professional fundraisers, but sometimes on there people will put up posts of collection buckets and tins that they don't want. Charities hoard these things, and especially at the moment, I think charities will be downsizing offices. So definitely have a look if you can find any of those. Maybe don't necessarily invest a huge amount in them. We just literally printed stickers ourselves and stuck them on, but try and get those around campus. If you've got challenge participants and those charities aren't providing those buckets, you might need a few, but try and see where you can get them from. I definitely recommend Fundraising Chat for that. Try and wangle some free room booking. We were able to do this with the university. It will make the world of difference. If you can have jailbreak talks, then try and pop those on in those rooms and things to try and get people involved. If you have charities doing events, they will want a space to promote it, so try and get that established now. Do all your branding through Canva, super free, very snazzy, you'll look amazing. Always do early ticket sale discounts for events so that things start to fill up and you have that cash to do things like order event tops. Always do like 20% off or 2 for 1 on those initial ticket sales. And if you need a percentage of your some cash to come into your rag, either look at doing something like the collection tins for a couple of weeks every year. We would do it that money went to us. We obviously had to put signs on to say that it was going to rag to run rag, or talk to your student union about allowing a percentage for running costs. We didn't feel comfortable with that, but it's a way of getting cash in that somehow some other rugs get cash in, and you will need some to keep going. Sorry that was super rushed and that it was a bit crazy and that I rattled through about 500 things. I hope it was helpful. I don't know if anyone has any questions. I can't see any.
There haven't been any coming in on the chat, Rebecca, but if anyone has any they'd like to ask, please do. No, I don't think so.
Cool.
So Rebecca, you're going to be in the coffee shop after this?
Yeah, I don't know what one, but I'll go into one.
Well, there is a link on the chat, so if you just follow that, if everyone follows that link, and obviously there's some collaborations going on between rags, which is looking good. Yeah, thank you so much, Rebecca. That's been really, really good. And if you guys want to chat on social media, it's #StudentOpsFest. Let us know what you found useful, and on our NASTA page as well, there's a little poll that's gone up, so let us know what's worked and what hasn't.
Fab. And if anyone has any questions they think of after today, normally I'd put my email on the screen, but I didn't. But you can find me on LinkedIn or Facebook, and I'm really happy to help with stuff. I'm super passionate about rags and things. So if you've got any questions about setting anything up, if you want more detailed stuff around events, I can definitely help with that. And if there's anything that people think of later, just let us know.
That's great. Lovely. Thank you, Rebecca, and we'll see you in the coffee shop.
Thanks. Bye, guys.